All right. I just finished Joyce Carol Oates' latest book, Fox. And I guess I needed to take a drive after the reading experience. I read it, it took me about 6 days. I could have stayed with the book in maybe 1 or 2 sittings, but I needed to relish the beautiful writing, the great narrative. Probably for me so far, it's probably been the best book that I've read in 2025. I hope you can see the cover. I do like the cover. Joyce Carol Oates, Fox. But I've been reading a few kind of sort of angry reviews about the topic, about the subject of the narrative, which is why this is such a good novel, why this is such a great piece of literature. It concerns a well, I don't know if I don't know if YouTube allows, people talk about words, you can't use certain words. It's a teacher, a male teacher, Mr. Fox, who is this in the first, say, 200 pages, is this absolutely charming, intelligent, lovely man who teaches at a very, very prestigious high school. And then you suddenly get thrust into his background, into his history, and you discover that he's not the man that you thought he would be. But I guess initially, when you read the book, Fox, you do have an idea of that. Obviously, there's something going on that is not natural, that is not above board, and so you go. Even though in the first beginning of the book, where the character of Mr. Fox is introduced as some brilliant teacher who has very close relationships with some of his students. And in sexual terms, he calls his favorite students my little kittens. So you kind of get where this is going from. The language Joyce Carol Oates has chosen it's not explicit. The sexual explicitness in this novel is not pornographic, so you would say. But it is uncomfortable to read. It is challenging to read, and I can see why people are, some critics are, losing their top about it. But ultimately, it's a book that she has written. This book about how a man in his pathology behaves, how he gets away with it, how he plots and plans and deceives, and basically the so-called, whenever you hear that, oh, he's so charismatic. Yes, he's extremely charismatic. He's a man who is in the book, the character has won a single poetry competition, and that kind of, it's all about credentials. How does he look? What has he done? And his manipulation of the system in a litigious sense. He uses the threats of exposure, even though he is doing these disgusting crimes against children. The way he weevils out of many of his situations where he finally gets caught, there's enough trouble because young children, young girls are cutting themselves, committing, trying to top themselves, and he's when it finds out, there's something about Mr. Fox that has caused this, he understands how schools, private schools, with their trustees, want to avoid publicity about the fact that they've allowed this predator to come into their community. So he turns it on its head by saying, well, you can't say this about me without evidence, and the fact that you're doing this without evidence, I'm going to sue you. So again, it just demonstrates how some people, well, evil people, nasty people, I don't even know the word is, but the idea is that someone who is allowed access to children, and his victims are girls from between, I think, the age of, what he considers his target audience, 11 to 13. And there are many, many sort of ugly passages where he talks about, growing tired of a certain child because she's grown up and because she's matured. So it's a very, very uncomfortable novel to read. But it's not. I can see why people, I can see why there's been some negativity around it, but it highlights the attitude that how not easy, but how charisma, good looks, because he's a good looking man, and fake credentials can get someone into a community, into a secret space where the person, Mr. Fox, takes advantage of young children who are at an age where they are easily manipulated. And the thing that's hardest about the novel is that the younger children who are the characters, they fall in love with Mr. Fox because they've been manipulated, they've been disabused of their intellectual capacity, their emotional capacity, and Mr. Fox's whole throughout the book, you just get this feeling that he knows exactly what to say, how to say it, when to say it. He's got this program that he runs quite easily in his career as a teacher. Now, in the book, this is not a spoiler. Mr. Fox is found dead, and this is the novel's idea is of who killed him, why they killed him, all the secrets sort of bubbling up to the surface about who he was, and there's great scenes, or there's great narrative points where, because no one knows about the insidious side of Mr. Fox, and how the whole school is just the private school that he works in when he is murdered. They just behave because they've lost this brilliant young teacher. Is it suicide? Is it murder? But if you read the book, obviously you get far more than what I can just say, and it definitely is a worthy read. I can understand why some people might not want to read it, but it's such a well-crafted story. I'm not a huge reader of Joyce Carol Oates. I've read a number of her books, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I have read a number of her books in the past. And this particular edition was gifted to me from a friend who lives in London. And thanks to Eugenie, because the book hasn't been released in Australia. It won't be released until September sometime, but it was released in Europe in July, in middle of July. So I've had this opportunity to read this book before it's been brought forth into Australia, and it's a good book. It's brilliantly written. It's a horrific story, and it's well worth reading. It is entertaining, of course. It's shocking, but it is an enjoyable read because it's so well written. The characters are so strong. The story is so bleak and so ugly. It is a captivating and highly engaging piece of literature. And like I said, for me, this is so far in August the 7th, I think we're today, one of the greatest books of the year for me. I have, I mean, there's still 5 or 6 months to go before the end of the year, but this book has really grasped my attention. It is worthy of a read, despite its subject matter, because Joyce Carol Oates has created, and it's not like, because in the story, in the narrative, she does mention Lolita, the novel. She does mention Edgar Allan Poe, who I think he was in love with his, I don't know, 13-year-old cousin or something. And also she does mention Alice in Wonderland, which again, written by Robert Louis Stevenson. And he too had some kind of fascination, some kind of unhealthy fascination with, young girls, age 11 to 13 to 14 perhaps. And in the book, she builds this narrative of how clever men, intellectual, good-looking men I think there's a program to the insanity and the madness that these men use in order to deceive and entrap these young girls into believing that they're in love with him. And that's the one thing that always comes through, is that the girls, the victims, are in love with Mr. Fox. They are, they will do things, they will do things to themselves, to hurt themselves, to make their lives miserable, if they don't feel that Mr. Fox is giving them the attention they deserve. And that is the downside of not the downside, there's no down or up or down, but this is one of the horrible aspects of this character, is that he has this very specific time where he goes, before girls mature, and once they break the threshold, just like in Lolita, once the scumbag reaches a certain level of sort of intimacy, that they find themselves, maturing into people, he loses total interest in them. And these young girls are just exposed to heartbreak, not just the heartbreak of being deceived, but the heartbreak of them being sent into Coventry by the man that they supposedly love. So, and the resulting emotional and physical damage they do to themselves. So the book is filled with that sort of ugliness of what these type of men do to children. And I mean, I read it with, I did read it. It was engaging because you just wanted to know what happened. You wanted to know what the outcome was going to be. And the outcome, by the end of the book, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, there is a resolution where, again, communities, school communities with trustees, you get the feeling that instead of facing an ugly truth, are happier to hide behind litigious movements, are happy to make sure that let's not get this well known. Let's protect the families of the children, but let's not promote any idea of justice, because if there's an idea of, because the injustice of what's happened to the young girls in this book is known, well then communities are going to struggle to come to terms with that. So there is that sense of hiding, and I don't think that's far-fetched. I think from a lot of the cases that I've read about in the real world, where people in certain communities have perpetrated vile acts against children, it seems that the powers that be in that community would rather keep the crime silent and push it aside, and use money and use law and litigious efforts to make sure that no one else finds out about the crime that's been committed. And I do think that happens more often than not. And I think Joyce Carol Oates' book, Fox, demonstrates that there needs to be a really, really tough truth when dealing with these kind of crimes. And at the end of the day, Joyce Carol Oates has written a book that there is a sense of revenge and justice that does occur. And I'll leave that up to you, the reader, if you think it was worthwhile. And at the close of the book, you do not feel satisfied that the story was resolved in a legal manner, but it was resolved in a social, tribal manner. And Joyce Carol Oates has taken that idea and has said, well, in some communities, in some societies, in some civilizations, there is only one place for people like that. And, well, when you read the book, you might find out about it. Anyway, that was Joyce Carol Oates' Fox. An interesting, brilliant read, a tough read, a challenging read. I think it's a worthy read. I think people will enjoy it in the sense of a literary experience. It's not a feel-good book, but it's certainly a book that is going to make noise and going to, I think people need to read it because it's well written, it's a great story and a good book. And hopefully Joyce Carol Oates, Mr. Fox, or Fox as it's called, will be read by many, many people in the future. Anyway, that was episode 71. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you guys on my next episode. Goodbye.